They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Loan you that cottage promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Program to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed, disconnect.
So we, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful friends. It is so exciting to welcome to Rogue Ways the thoughtful master and quiet genius of an astronomer who mapped the heavens and saw that it fit better when we looked at it from our specific viewpoint, instead of from some ancient and archaic starting point, disconnected to us in time and space. The creator and architect of Mastering the Zodiac, the teacher of true astrology and astronomy, the interpreter of detail and intrapersonal truth, Athen Chimenti. Welcome to Rogue Ways, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's great to be here.
Awesome. And before we get started, I always like to remind people that if you want to support Rogue Ways and all that I do, if you found value here and you want to share value back, please go to subscribestar.com/rogue-ways and become a subscriber and support what you love. Otherwise it disappears, right? And I thank you to all of the people who are already supporting. That's immensely pleasurable to me. I love it. And Athen, I usually start with a pointless question of the episode. And so I was going to ask you what your favorite creature is, whether it's animal, insect, whatever, and why.
Well, that's a great question. A dolphin, actually.
Oh, wow.
Why? Yeah, I don't know. I've always been drawn to the ocean. I just think it would be really cool to be able to, have a community because they're social. They get to swim, super intelligent. So intelligence, social, and spiritual would be, I guess, the three things. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love dolphins for all of the same reasons. And I feel like, I'm always like, if I could be an animal, I'd want to be a bird because I could fly, or a dolphin because they basically fly like through the water.
Right. Or they jump really high or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. They kind of fly through the air too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And they're so
cool.
Intelligent. Like you said, they've got language.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even think that we understand them. I don't know if you've read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but I love the concept that the dolphins just like are smarter than us and just take off when the world's about to end. They're like, okay, see you later.
See ya. Yeah, exactly. I may have gotten it from that actually, because I read that when I was a child. Yeah, it was a good book.
Very influential.
Yeah.
There was something I'm trying to remember that I learned the other day about the number 42, and I was like, maybe Douglas Adams knew this, and that's why he chose 42 for the answer to life, the universe, and everything, but I can't remember what it was. I wish I would have written it down. It's just like too much information comes my way, and I lose half of it.
Yeah, I forgot as well. Yeah, it was like the meaning of life. Was it number 42? Is that what it was?
It was 42.
Yeah.
And some people have said that's the like gematria value of the word math, and that's why he chose it. But it was something about like, I want to say it was something about like chemical compounds or structures or shapes or something, and there was 42 in the universe or something, or maybe it had something to do with platonic solids. I don't know. It was something like that. And I was like, I bet
there was a reason.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, there was a reason. Because when I read it, I was like, he just picked a random number.
Yeah.
That's what I thought when I was reading it. Because it was funny, But, yeah.
Right.
I'm sure there's meaning behind it, yeah.
I'd love to know. Well, I usually want to ask people just to get a background, like where you came from or what your earliest life was like.
So, I was pretty troublesome teen, I suppose, so we'll skip that part. I joined the Navy when I was about 20 to try to get my life straight, and that was very helpful because I got to, get some discipline that I needed and some structure in my life, which was super helpful. Plus, I got to travel and meet some really good relationships and people and stuff. So very helpful there. After that, I just started kind of running my own business. I was always very business minded. I got a business degree shortly after. Very logical person most of my life. So things like astrology or spirituality, I was really not very keen on. In fact, I would probably debate it, if someone brought it up or something. So, but then I started getting into, meditation very deeply, and that really broadened my perspective. And within those meditative times, I started exploring different perspectives, one of which was astrology. And astrology just really stuck with me because it was a way of explaining, which is something I've always tried to do. I was always very philosophical, like trying to explain my reality.
Yeah.
But it did it in such a way that it was like still logical, and I could still apply that kind of grounded perspective to it. So of all the spiritual mediums, or medians that I got into, like that was, that was the one that stuck out to me the most. So I started doing it for myself, and then started doing it for others, and then Mastering the Zodiac was born out of that.
Wow.
So
What originally brought you into starting to meditate and even looking into sort of the less materialist sides of life?
yeah, Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like slowly exploring into like self help, and then The Power of Now kept coming up, which is Eckhart's book, and I
Yeah.
was like, all right, let's do it. So I did it, and then one thing led to another, and I was just like just more present, more mindful is really what it was about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I really love this when people come from a really materialist side of things into the more spiritual side of things. And I would say that was sort of my path as well. And I'm a naturally skeptical person, and I'm very like logical, and I like to think things through, but I also have this side of me that is become exceptionally spiritual. And what a lot of people I think would say was woo woo, but it all came from a place of trying to debunk things and having, various experiences that I couldn't necessarily debunk, or learning actual scientific data about the types of things that people still don't believe, even though we have scientific data to show it, because they're sort of almost stuck in the materialist viewpoint. So I like to see
Yeah.
that, you came from that side.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really grateful for that. I would say too, like, and maybe you'll, resonate with this for your own life. Is like, in a sense, I was always kind of open-minded though. I think that's really the key,
Yeah.
is like having an open mind. Like, even though it's very logical and everything had to be verified and make scientific sense, I was still always kind of open-minded. And I think that was the gift that if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have ever branched out into different perspectives in the first place.
Yeah. And I think, and maybe you'll agree too, that it's also a matter of like curiosity, because you can be kind of open minded but
Yeah.
never go searching, right? But if you have
Right.
that sort of inclination to be like, wait, what is this actually all about? Or like,
Yeah.
what's happening here? Then I think you end up over
Right.
in wild
Right.
places.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Definitely been there deep down the rabbit hole. Yeah.
And it's also neat to hear about the military aspect. I mean, there's a lot of just like negativity in general about the military, about police, and about that sort of part of our society and our world. But if I at least I came from that sort of side of things as well. And then I've gotten to this place where I'm like, we hire people to like take care of our safety needs, and maybe there's a lot of corruption. I think there's obviously a lot of corruption in various areas, but at the same time, the things you talked about are the things that I think a lot of people do get out of being in the military or involved with those types of apparatus in our society, and they're really positive things. So it's cool to hear that as well, and I wonder what you think about, like, would your military sort of self think about you now? Are the two like cohesive, or if you went back
That's
in
a great
time
question.
and met yourself, would your old self be like, what the hell happened to you?
Yeah, probably. I would probably think taking some drugs or something. I don't know. Yeah. But in a sense, like, if I guess I could talk to my, past self, I could explain it a little bit like, hey, all that stuff you're doing that you're trying to figure out, like what life is and how there's more to life and all this. Probably try to rationalize it a little bit
Yeah.
to that old me, maybe,
It'll
or
make sense eventually, trust me.
right. Yeah, exactly. And then with the military, there's really good people in the military, and doing trying to do the right thing.
Right.
And within there was like some really, really deep relationships of people that you wouldn't suspect would normally join the military. Like, we think military, we think like people who are just, and it is like that. It's very much like you go and there's structure and you have to, just follow orders, and there's no like real sense of autonomy and self. But
Yeah.
actually within the military there is a lot of free thinkers, a lot of like very independent people, and they follow the orders, they do all that, but at the same time, like, they do recognize what's going on under the surface as well.
Yeah.
So on the surface the military looks like this kind of like follow orders, robotic almost kind of a thing, but within there's like a lot of truths, a lot of truth seeking, a lot of really good discussions you have, because you're in it, you're like seeing it, you're like seeing the machine and everything, and so it's hard not to. And that's why a lot of like veterans that come out now, they're very much like into this kind of stuff, like truth seeking, deep diving,
Yeah.
sharing the truth, stuff like this. Yeah.
That's a great point. I really like to highlight that and emphasize that, because I think it's easy to sort of cast people aside and be judgmental and, you know, not pay attention to
Yeah.
the sort of nuance there. Um, and I think, you know, there's something to that, like having a lack of autonomy, you know, almost like losing yourself to this sort of machine that is a actual part of like self-development. You know, if you haven't sort of lost
Hmm.
yourself to that and dissolved into a greater whole, then I think it's less valuable when you do become autonomous and completely independent. So there's
Yeah.
something in there that's even like very valuable, I think.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I think everything in life's about balance. And sometimes when you go to one extreme, it's like life will have a way of balancing itself, you know? And we could even think of like the whole universe is literally just in a constant state of balancing itself.
Yeah.
So what you would think is like, I don't know, like if we simplify it, like a wrong choice or some choice you would never make before, it actually ends up strengthening the opposite energy and helping you like maybe become more grateful about certain things or have, like you said, more autonomy, more freedom because of that polarity. So it's like we're all going through these polarities and like going too far and then coming back, going too far and coming back because life and even humans themselves have like this self balancing mechanism of like bringing things back into the center.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing so much in society now is these extremes.
Right.
And but this is all part of the process of kind of recalibrating, I think is what it's about.
I hope that that's really true. We're going to these extremes so that we'll come back to something like way better.
More centered, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's been kind of the history too. If we look at history, every time we go to extremes and then there's a repercussion, right? A rebalancing kind of thing. But it's always making us grow and develop. Like it's almost like spirals. Like even though we're kind of going around and repeating, we're not really. We're more like spiraling and growing
Yeah.
in the process.
That's exactly how I see like the yuga cycles, right? I don't know if you're familiar with
Mm,
the cycles of time
a
or
little
whatever.
bit.
Yeah, and they,
Yeah.
you know, we have the
Yeah.
dark ages that we swoop down, then we have the golden ages and we swoop up. And if you just look at it as this sort of like waveform, you could think like, well, we just keep going back to the same places over and over again. But I kind of feel like it's more like this spiral, and we're like they're dark
Right.
and they're light and they have similar qualities, but we're actually moving towards something and away from something
Right.
else overall.
Right, which is also seen with with like just the solar system, because like we go to school and we learn about this like flat solar system
Yeah.
model, but actually everything's spiraling. Like the sun is flying through space, and we're just kind of like doing this kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So it's like spirals, not the same. You don't come back to the same place every time. Everything's changing.
I love that. And people have brought that up. I wonder, I wasn't necessarily planning to talk to you about this, but people have brought up, you know, if we're not on a flat, motionless plane around which, you know, the stars are flying, why do we only see the same constellations over all these vast distances of time and nothing ever moves or
Mm,
changes? And
right.
I don't pretend to know, but I would imagine it's such a vastly huge like space and movement that
Yeah.
even though we think it's this huge amount of time, it's actually this like tiny little blip that we barely are seeing. Do you know what I mean? Like what's your take on
Yeah.
that stuff?
For all we know, I mean, the universe could just be expanding and contracting, expanding and
Yeah.
contracting. Like the Big Bang idea and all this just could be just one very small part of a cycle,
Right.
really. I mean, I just see everything as like cycles within cycles. And yeah, I mean, life is like kind of, I don't know. It's like we could be in a black hole, where they say you go into a black hole and time just kind of like stops. Like
Stops.
that's how
Yeah.
it feels in a sense. It's like it's infinite.
Right.
Like the whole idea of like time is really, I think, a mental construct.
Yeah.
Like the way it's like the mind's way of trying to make sense of the experience and by categorizing it in a sequence of events so that it can process the experience.
Yeah.
But in truth, everything's just happening right now, all at once. Every experience is just happening, in the now. But yeah, then the mind sees it as a time linear kind of a thing, I
It's like
think.
it's too much. Just like that space,
Yeah, you
the amount of
couldn't.
space and time with the universe, like our brain can't really
Yeah,
fathom
it's
it.
just right, right.
We're not
But
meant to
sometimes with
process it.
meditation, you get a little bit, you kind of like let the more mental or ego side of the mind kind of subside. Then you start to become aware of the vastness of it.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, like dang, this is space. infinity, I don't know, however you can describe it.
Isn't that weird? Is that so? Would that indicate that it's less logical and more like almost like a feeling or a bodily sort of knowing that would allow you to have that
But even the
experience?
but even the body's physical, right?
Right.
So I think it has to do with consciousness itself. And I think what our physical bodies are is we've just trapped some consciousness. So consciousness is infinite, but the body can like trap a little bit of consciousness and then perceive through that consciousness in this limited kind of way.
Yeah.
But when you meditate, you start to access more of that infinite consciousness, and then you're not perceiving it from the either body or mental limitations as much. You always are as a human, but just not as much. And then relative to the normal experience, that's like crazy. It's like spiritual awakening or something,
Yeah.
to the extreme if it was that far into it.
Yeah. I like that description. That I understand that deeply.
Yeah, that's just how I see it. But again, these are just words that we're using to try to
Right.
describe the experience within the experience. So it's like you
It's
never really know.
very
Yeah.
limited. Yeah. Words will always fail.
Yeah,
I just had
exactly.
this when you were describing this. I had this like I went back to the dolphins and I was like, do dolphins meditate? You know what I mean? Like if we measured their
Well,
brain state.
here's what I know. So I'm not a scientist, but I do know that they actually have, so when they go to sleep, their brain literally splits in half in the sense that only half of their brain will be sleeping and the other half is awake.
That's crazy.
And so they're basically, when they're sleeping, they're half awake and half asleep. And then they'll do it with the other side, and then the other side will go to sleep. And so they could literally split their brain into being both asleep and conscious at the same time.
It's crazy.
So, I mean, if you want to call that meditation, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's what we like. If you're talking about like lucid dreaming or astral travel, they both require a certain balance between like
Right.
awake and asleep. So that I'm like, is our dolphins
Right.
astral traveling?
Right.
Never
It
know.
could be. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, so you left the military and you started the Mastering the Zodiac eventually. And so what sort of, I guess, drove you to want to bring this astronomy and astrology to the masses in the way that you do it?
Yeah. Mainly because no one was doing it. So I was into astrology, following normal Western stuff, and one day I just went outside and like held my cell phone up, and I was aware of the difference between what we know of as like sidereal and tropical, like the Vedic and the Western, and how it's different and all this. But it never really clicked until I went outside, and like in Western they said it was like a full moon in Taurus or something. And so I was like, all right, because we have the cell phones now, you can actually see it,
Yeah.
So I held it up and I looked, and it was in the sign before. So let's say Aries, and I was like, huh. And then it just really hit me. And so I went online. I was like, is anybody like using these actual boundaries? And there's some people, getting close. Like there's the IAU boundaries, but those are created by an astronomical union, which isn't using it for astrological purposes. And so they're not referencing the actual ecliptic, which is what we use in astrology. So the boundaries were based on just not the ecliptic, but just the constellation. So that doesn't work for astrology. And that's what most astrologers who were doing this system were using.
Hmm.
And so I was like, this information has to get out there. So I literally created the boundaries using the visible sky, just putting the medium point between the ending of one constellation, the beginning of another one,
Wow.
and then doing the median point between there. So it's like you're visibly looking at it. And it's super accurate, way more accurate than the other systems.
Wow.
So, I had to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. I love what I'm doing, but at the same time, it all kind of fit. It was like, this is something I always wanted to do. And then I also found this really important niche or value that I could contribute to.
So it's really the method you're using isn't just sidereal. It's actually your own method that you have developed based on the actual sky and what it's actually doing at that time.
Yeah, true sidereal. Yeah, that's what I call it.
So then how? Maybe I don't know if this. I don't even know how to ask this question. So bear with me. But like, how would you then, and can you even like project out and know what is going to happen next year, for example, based on your system?
Well, because we're using the fixed stars for the constellations.
Okay, so you still.
So the stars are fixed. So whenever we look and say like, oh, Mars is going to be in Pisces or whatever, so Mars is moving, but those constellations are fixed in the sky. So
Right.
once you have it, it's like everything's just relative to those stars.
So
Yeah.
do you have like a computer system that you would use to do that, or
Oh,
you
like
just
it,
like?
yeah. And that's the other piece of the puzzle, right? So if it wasn't for Gavin Burns, who created Prometheus astrology software, I would not be able to do this.
Wow.
So he just so happens, I don't know how many years before, but obviously before, created this, and he has the only software that can do this. All the other astrology softwares, you can't do the custom boundaries,
Wow.
but with this one you can. And yeah, and I'm
Huh.
super grateful that he did that,
That's
because
amazing.
you're right. I mean, that's the missing link, and that's really the reason why I think we hadn't done this up until now, is because the calculations, just very difficult and very time consuming. The thing about regular astrology is everything's at even 30 degrees, all the constellations, and especially with tropical, it makes it a whole lot easier to make charts, because we used to have to make charts by hand, astrologers.
Yeah.
Computers came out, and then so it was this process between computers coming out, then the internet coming out, to get this information that, hey, we're not using the actual constellations, to Gavin creating Prometheus, and then me. So it's like I don't know however long we've had computers, so it's taken time to do this, but that's why it's happening now versus happened like 50 or 100 years, or you know it's what we used to do thousands and thousands of years ago. Like, we would just look at the sky,
Yeah.
right?
That's exactly what I was going to
So
ask next. Is this the
yeah,
thing that you're doing by using the actual, the
yeah,
actual boundaries of the actual constellations and where the planets and stars are within that? That's what we used to
right,
do.
exactly. But we did it because we were outside sitting by the campfire every night looking up at the stars. As soon as we got into cities, we lost that connection.
So it's
And that was around the same time that astrology changed.
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it
Yeah.
is correlated.
Yeah,
So
totally
it's
correlated. Yeah.
and is that also when it became codified? We sat down inside with our fake lights and we were like, "Here's how you do it," and then that's when it became like sort of
Yeah.
fixed and then
Yeah,
that.
it became yep, so it became fixed like pre-Babylonian times. So we're talking like maybe 2 to 4,000 AD. So we'll say about, 3,000. And it was all to create a calendar system.
Hmm.
So basically, we could tell that with the invention of language also came this need to be able to track time. And so obviously for like travel, being able to travel at certain times, being able to monitor the crops and agriculture, they created calendars. And the first calendar was the astrological calendar. So it was based primarily on the constellations. But they didn't use the actual size of the constellations. They used the even 30 degrees to make it easy, so that you could just quickly draw a circle, put 12 lines or 6 lines, make 12, segments, and then, make it like the clock everyone sees. And guess what's the same system? It's 12, right? So you're there, you're looking at the clock, it's easy to reference. Imagine having a clock that had one, let's say between 12 and 1 o'clock was larger than between 1 and 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right, that would be the equivalent of them making it into true sidereal. So I think the intention was good, because the intention wasn't to make an astrological system. The intention was to make a calendar system, just to be able to track seasons,
Yeah.
right? And with that intention, it was great. The problem is once we kept using astrology, I mean, there's arguments that like even during the Greek and Roman times, we were still using true sidereal,
Hmm.
because really the astrology that we see today came during the very late part of the Roman Empire with Ptolemy, who kind of made this declaration that it would just be easier if we all just fixed the constellations around the seasons for astrologers, and that would make it easier for all astrologers. And so since then, we had the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages and all this, and so that system got propagated, and that's what all the astrologers use, and that's the astrology we use today. But it's very likely that just prior to that, we were using the actual constellations in the sky, but that system, in a sense, got lost because it wasn't part of the Roman sanctioned and then later the church sanctioned astrology, which is the simplified calendaric seasonal astrology. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
nice to be able to have time in common, so you and I can like meet here, for example, even though we're in different time zones, and
Yeah.
all of the things that come from that. But it is interesting to see how it gets muddied when you apply it in other ways.
Yeah, if you're using it for the different reasons,
Yeah.
yeah. No.
And so when did Ophiuchus, and am I saying that correctly, come into
A
things?
fucus. A
Ophiuchus.
fucus, but yeah, there's room for interpretation there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ophiuchus, when did that? Why wasn't Ophiuchus part of things before? And when did it change? And when did it come into things?
That same time. So
Oh, okay.
a fucus, yeah, because there's 13. So
Right.
imagine making a calendar with 13, right? Because the reason a calendar works so well is because everything's divisible very evenly, 12 to 4 to 3 to 2.
Right.
With 13, you can't even, it's prime number, you can't divide it at all, right? So
So they just got
a
rid of them.
fucus, yeah. So and it makes sense in a sense because a fucus and Scorpio do share the same part of the sky.
Okay.
So if you look up at the sky, you will see Scorpio that wraps under like this along the ecliptic, and then a fucus is basically standing on top of Scorpio like this.
Huh.
So they are associated with the eighth house or the eighth energy of the sky. And that's why I personally only do use 12 houses because they share that same segment of the sky. But there is a clear difference between when a planet is in Scorpio and a planet is in a fucus. Now, it could be the same difference as, because remember, everything is like blending, right? When we're using the sky, everything's blending. So it could be the same difference as something at the beginning of, say, Virgo and something at the end of Virgo. There's a difference there because they're in different parts of the sky. But there's definitely a clear difference between Scorpio and a fucus. Scorpio about bringing things to the surface, and then a fucus literally working with those things, which is what a fucus symbolizes, the healer archetype. Right. So actually working with the deeper realms of life, of the human experience, of the shadow, of medicine, right? These kinds of things. So yeah, they probably just merged it together because it was the same part of the sky, but then we lost that interpretation. Yeah.
Interesting. I would have thought Fucus and Sagittarius would have shared the region because I was a Sagittarius, and then if I do sidereal through your method, then I'm a Fucus. So I thought.
Well, that's because everything is almost assigned before.
Oh, gotcha.
So
yeah. Okay.
So most people who think they're a Leo, they might actually be a Cancer. Yeah. Cancer coming before Leo.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
but it's similar. They're next to each other.
Yeah. It's just funny because my whole life I've had my traditional chart or whatever, my tropical chart, and I interpreted that for myself when I was very young, and I was like, this all seems like pretty legit and pretty accurate and whatever. And then I got to whenever I think I heard you on Crow a while ago, and I think I went to your site and did, because you have a free service, right, where you can just go put in your all your information and get the chart, right? So I did that, and then I finally, not even that long ago, maybe like a month ago, I actually went about like looking at it, like, and I'm not an astronomer or astrologer, so I'm just doing it my simple method. I'm like, okay, this sign kind of is supposed to represent this, and when I went through all of the pieces, I was like, this is the most accurate thing I've ever seen, about myself, which is really weird because I wasn't sure what to expect. I was like, I mean, they're totally different, right? They're very, like you said, they're going to be similar, and they are. But also the things that were added, I guess, I was like, this makes a lot more sense in my life. So
yeah. And that's a response that we get a lot. Yeah. And if your visitors haven't done it, I would say if you have an open mind, check it out, see if it fits. I still think that the tropical system is accurate to a point. I think it does show like a more physical experience because again, it's based around the seasons. But definitely check out the true sidereal positions, the actual positions, because that's seems to be more core to the self, and you could say is more essential. Because in astrology, we create derivative charts, charts from charts, and you could say that tropical is a derivative chart because it's based out of the original chart, which is the actual locations. So there's still accuracy in these derivative charts. You could call it like the seasonal derivative chart or something. But yeah, if you want to look at the fundamental foundational elements, the true sidereal is what most people say is what that describes in that
That
sense.
that's interesting too, because I don't even remember how, but when I was interpreting my tropical chart, that is the part that was the most accurate, was the physical. For some reason, there was a way that I was able to know the like physical maladies I might suffer in my life, and they've been incredibly accurate. But I don't actually even remember how I figured that out, or like what book I used to interpret what thing to even come to that conclusion. But they were accurate. So that's interesting that you say that physical
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
like more self.
yeah, and that's really the self, right? I mean, because if it's describing the self, I mean, we are so dynamic. We are the whole zodiac sign, and that's why astrology does get a lot of slack from the scientific community because they could view it as you're just interpreting it, from that perspective of who you are.
Right.
And in a sense, that's true
Right.
because we are the whole zodiac, and it really just depends on what facet of the self are you describing, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the difference with it is that when you look at the planets like the sun is the literal like self-expression or how you view life kind of energy. And then that's when it starts to separate. So we
Yeah.
all have Taurus, for example, but not everyone has that sun in Taurus, which means not everyone views life through that lens of our values, resources, self-reliance. We have that, but we don't necessarily view life in that way, right?
Right.
So it's almost like the self is the whole thing, but then the planets are more of like the ego's experience and perspectives. And there's still so many different ones of them. But it's those perspectives that then we can kind of help kind of navigate and just like kind of figure out what the life experiences are about, what the personality's like, what the life path is, things like that. But
Yeah.
we're very dynamic. And
Yeah.
even with astrology, we're only looking at just the incy vincy little piece of a person or
Right.
of the self. And so we have to always keep that in mind, when we're interpreting both for ourselves and for others, of course.
Right. Well, and I'd love to eventually get an interpretation from you and see how far off I was from what
Oh,
my
awesome.
interpretations would be. So that'd be really fun. Um,
Yeah, email me for sure.
yeah. And and yeah, I really encourage anyone out there listening to go, like you said, to your site and do, make sure you have your accurate birth time and your birth location and whatever, and put it in and just see what your chart is and how different it is. And I really resonated with my Sagittarius sun, but Ophiuchus makes like a lot more sense to me. My entire purpose in life has consistently been about how I can help heal or help other people. Like always,
So,
like what can I use? How can I do it? And how can I do it best? So, um,
so yeah, so that's the sun, right? It's the lens through which you view life. Like you definitely would have some Sagittarius qualities. I don't know if maybe you have Venus or Mercury there. Like
I
usually
do,
those planets are next to the sun.
I do have,
So,
yeah, I can't remember
so like you
exactly
have
what,
that,
but
yeah. So like you have that Sagittarius, but
right.
on a fundamental level, do you view life through the lens of what is going on under the surface and the shadow and helping heal and stuff, or do you view life through the lens of gaining higher perspective and stuff? The higher perspective stuff's there, but which one is the lens through which you view life,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I really love learning about all that stuff, and I wish that I had the mind for memorizing it all better, because it would be really
It's
fun
so
to do
hard.
what you do, but I love that there's
I'm telling you,
yeah,
it's a whole language. It's
really.
yeah, it's like learning another language. So unless you're gonna put in like 2 years or something, whatever a language would take, depending on how much time you put into it, that's astrology. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm really grateful that people like you exist who are this passionate about it and into it, that you've not only are serving people in, I think, a regular way, frequently, but that you've also developed this entirely new way of looking at it and applying it, which is amazing. Like what a gift to humanity.
Thank you, thank you. I do my best. And if it
um
wasn't me, it would have been somebody else as well.
and so I don't know how, if I'm going to phrase this correctly, so bear with me, but I have this concept that I think I got from sort of Gnostic lectures that I listen to, and maybe somewhere else, but it's this idea that there's actually sort of like and maybe I'm even misinterpreting that, but that there's like a continuum in the constellations and the signs, and that there's, the way they described it is that Leo is like the crown, it's like the sun, it's like the epitome of your like personal evolution. And so do you see that sort of thing going on with the signs? Is there a progression? Is there like a start and an end point? Is there like a base and a crown?
Yeah, it all comes down to the perspective. Yeah. So, like if we looked at it from a physical seasonal perspective, then Aries would be said to start the zodiac. That's why in tropical, on the spring equinox, the way tropical is set up is right on the spring equinox, they set it at 0 degrees Aries. So spring is the beginning. So Aries is about initiative, action, a sense of identity, right? These kinds of active things. And then the cycle would start there. But the cycle has also said to start between or around Cancer and Leo, because like you said, it's the sun and moon, and in astrology, the sun and moon are the most fundamental of the personality.
Yeah.
And so you could start the chart there in between Cancer and Leo and work your way either direction. So it says you could actually start from Leo and start it that way. You could even go backwards, because Leo is the masculine outward energy. So you go, in this case, you would go counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Or you would go the feminine direction, more receptive direction, and go clockwise through the chart that way. And it could start like that. Or even in astrology, like anytime you want to look at something, like say you want to look at spirituality for somebody, you could put that planet at the beginning of the chart. And then the way that the rest of the chart's structured is all relative to that planet. So if you want to know about spirituality, you set that planet at the beginning of the chart, say it's Neptune, and then you're seeing everything in the context of Neptune, everything relative to Neptune. Wow. So really you could start the zodiac anywhere, and just as long as you remember that wherever you started, it's that you're looking at it from that perspective, from the perspective of that planet or of that constellation, if it's a constellation.
So do you work in that way or think about it in that way? And if so, like what purposes does it serve? I guess you just gave me some.
No. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So with individuals, it all comes down to what was the actual constellation that was rising.
Okay.
So that's where we set the beginning of the chart. So if we're doing like collective readings, like all of that, then I would typically just start at Aries, because that's the one that makes the most sense in terms of it being the beginning.
That makes sense.
And that's more physical too, for like global affairs and collective stuff. But for an individual, yeah, as long as they have their birth time, if not, we would use their sun sign. But what was the actual rising constellation? What was actually at the eastern horizon when they were born? Because that's where it starts in that sense, right? That's the first thing we see. So that shows who the person's becoming more of and what they're destined to become. And then the rest of the chart is set up around that perspective. But like I said, if someone wants to know about relationships or something like that, we can take the relationship planet, put it at the beginning, and then look at the rest of the chart in that context. So it really just depends what you want to look at. But usually it's what did the sky actually look like? That's what you're seeing with the chart, right? So the rising sign's over here, the setting sign was over here, and then you have the visible sky and then the sky underneath. And then you make your interpretations based on what you'd visibly see at that time if you were standing there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And do you feel, or do you have any like inclination that are all the signs sort of equal in their value? Or is there some that are like...
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, does anyone not?
No,
I guess. Or maybe everyone wants to be, their own sign, like Capricorns, we're all Capricorns, so maybe, they're better.
Well, I know there's
some
that have like you were saying, like a larger chunk of the sky, or...
Well, right. Right. So in that case, there would be perhaps certain signs that require more time to experience, right? So the larger constellations would be Leo, Virgo, and Pisces, and Taurus. To be your sort of larger one. So it could be that these signs, because whenever we have planets that transit through the sky, these are like time periods to develop that constellation's energy or that side of ourself. And certain sides of ourselves take longer to develop. or we could say certain elements of life take longer to develop. Like Pisces, for example, it's the spiritual constellation, very, very difficult to develop.
Mm.
So maybe there's just something about needing to take more time to do that. Collectively, if we split up the population and said, okay, well, because of the uneven constellations, there's more Pisces, Taurans, and Leos than anybody else, and Virgos, because there's just statistically, more of them, then you could say that maybe that's something society needs, more of that kind of energy, right?
Yeah.
So in that context, valuable in the sense of like we're all here to serve a purpose, and the life energy probably requires more people in certain energies to fulfill that particular life energy of that constellation.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. That's such a cool
Yeah.
interpretation. What
Yeah.
do you find, and maybe you don't know, I don't know if you studied this as much, but do you find that there's any signs or constellations that have maybe like far less people than they should, given how big they are, or far more people than they should, given how small they are? Any sort of
I
outliers like
haven't
that?
done any.
Okay.
I haven't done any statistical stuff because it's hard to do that when you're just reading one-on-one
True.
charts. Like it's too subjective. Yeah, but I'm sure there should be some statistical studies. Yeah, I think the more true sidereal catches on, there'll be more of this kind of, because people have done that work with like mainstream astrology, like
Yeah.
stuff like that, like statistical research and stuff. But yeah, hopefully soon with true sidereal, because I'm sure there's some good info like that. That would be interesting too if like we start to notice maybe it is actually equal or something like that. Like that would
Yeah.
be wild.
That'd be
Like
crazy.
imagine if there was just as many of the smaller constellations. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if there was like a huge, maybe in each generation, if there was like a huge influx of a certain type, then we could sort of like reflect, is this, and like you were saying, what the world
Ah,
needs more of right now? Or is there a reason why more are coming through at this
right.
time or
Right.
something?
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah.
fun. Now I'm going to go on
It'd
a
be interesting.
hunt to try to find that information.
Yeah, maybe it's already out there. Yeah.
Well, what do you recommend for people who are like not really great with astrology or astronomy or any of this, and they want to start to sort of maybe learn more about it or think more about it? What do you think would be most beneficial for people to sort of start with?
Yeah, definitely. Just go look at your chart, or if you want even simpler than that, just look at the sun sign dates, and then look at those dates again in the context of this is how the lens through which you view life, right? Because it's easy, like with the mainstream system, like there's a lot of like these deterministic interpretations, like Taurans are stubborn or whatever, Virgos are perfectionistic, and it's like with all those different interpretations, we can sort of get hung up and start to pick certain elements of like, oh, I'm a Virgo because, I mean, I've heard like wild things like, I'm a Scorpio because I love nature, even though these are like two very different things, right? But they'll like pull what they want from it. So,
Yeah.
uh, with the sun sign, just remember that that is the fundamental essence of the lens through which you view life. And then from that, you can get so much. Like if you are a Taurus sun, if you do view life through the lens of self-reliance and resourcefulness, then you can start to extrapolate so much more information about your personality with that. Maybe you do like luxurious things, or maybe not. Maybe you're more into nature. Like there's so many different ways to express Taurus energy, but
Yeah.
pay attention to the fundamental. Because one thing that all Taurus suns will share is that what's important to the resources of life, to connect to beauty, aesthetics, comforts, the natural world, resources, self-reliance, right? Because these words, like we were saying before, this isn't Taurus. No one can fully describe Taurus. These words are just meant to be used as pointers to try to point to what these essences of life are,
Yeah.
So just use those keywords as like a guide to help you connect to what that energy is about. And then ask yourself, do you view life through that lens of that energy? And then from there, you can take a look at your actual chart, look at the other planets. The moon is also very important. The rising sign, like I was saying, is very important. And then you can kind of work your way out from that. There's also a video on that page that walks you through how to read the chart in that context. And then once you've done that, if you want more information, there's tons of resources on the website, videos, again, how to read charts, the important elements of charts, things like this. And then if after that you want to do some one-on-one study, there are courses. So I have courses, both one-on-one and video courses. If those that are more into the video self-paced thing, there's also one of those as well. and of course readings and software and everything else after that. So, but I think that's a good, if you're wanting to learn astrology, that's a great step. Just start with your own chart, interpret it, see how it fits, and then maybe get in some videos or some courses after that.
That's excellent. And how do you see when people are going through this process and learning about this, that they're, what do you think is the benefit of, are there like problems in their life that they're going to be able to solve, or there sort of applications of it that are going to directly benefit them other than just a deeper understanding of themselves?
Yeah, the number one thing that I get the most from the value of a reading is confirmation, because I do believe like deep down we already know who we are, we know what our life path is. So I would say, definitely astrology can't tell you what to do or what future events will happen or what you should do, would be a better way of saying that, because the astrology, that's like, again, we already know the answer. So astrology is just meant to illuminate what you already feel to be true, sift away a lot of the conditioning that we've had, like constructs, societal things, even ideas about ourselves and stuff, help sift that away. So once the descriptions are described about who you are and your life experiences, it gives that sense of like, wow, it. It's like,
Yes.
yes, this is true. Like, this is who I am, or this is the important thing. This is the essence. So really, if you want, confirmation and a little bit of clarity in terms of how to work with some of this energy, then I think that's fundamentally what astrology does. And you can do that both from an overall life energy, like your life path, all the way to like, certain time periods, like 12 months ahead, how to work with temporary energies as well.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I feel the very same way about tarot. I do tarot readings, and I feel some people come
Right.
and they're like, tell me which of these things I should do. And I'm like, I can't tell you that, but I can do this, tell you like sort of the energies around you and what's going on. And it's almost 100% of the time. I shouldn't even say almost. It is 100% of the time that people are like, okay, I kind of knew. This is confirmation, and it's good to get
Yeah.
confirmation. It's good to feel more confident, about our understandings.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And that helps us make choices, right? Because I can't tell you how many times I've made a choice that I knew wasn't the right choice to make, but I made it anyways. Why did we do that?
right.
And astrology can help you in that process and help you make choices and stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we'll start to wind things down here, but I'm wondering if you even have sort of thought about this, or if you look out, or if you want to share these sorts of insights. Is there anything astrologically coming up that you would want people to sort of know about or think about, or the energies coming at
Oh
us
man,
that we
so
can deal
much.
with? There's so much. Okay, maybe we should have done that
Yeah,
earlier.
it's quite a year. Yeah.
Yikes.
Well, I would say, between now and mid-January, it's just good to just kind of be receptive. Just kind of see. It's good to put energy into things that are more soul satisfying, more spiritually satisfying. Best not to swim upstream during this time. We have Mars in Pisces. Mars is that fiery energy. Pisces is the oceans. It's very important we kind of put energy with the current instead of against it.
Okay.
We have a grand conjunction at the end of the year with Saturn and Jupiter, which is going to be new sort of foundations, both personally and collectively, coming out of that. And that'll be a great time to set some new intentions going into 2021, in the sense of what are you, because the real context about this year is what are you perceiving? What is your perception? Because the perception globally is changing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people also trying to push certain perspectives and things. So it's very important that you listen to your own perspective. You get plenty of time, like out of nature or just in your alone time, and really evaluate how you view life, because so much of life is determined by our perception of it. And this is really a year, and this is the Sagittarius energy because all these planets are in Sagittarius.
Wow.
So it's really this year of like paying attention to our perspective and really building upon the things that inspire us, that feel true, that give us, that open spirited energy and optimism about it, and build towards it. It's
Yeah.
not easy, it takes time, but this is a new foundation to build these potentials for the long term. And that's where Saturn comes in and helps us do this. At the beginning of the year, that was the restructuring with Saturn and Pluto. Everything's restructuring. But from this, as we approach the end of the year, it's a new beginning coming out of this of new foundations, personally and collectively. So it's very important to pay attention to what do you want? What do you want to build, for the future? And then there's an eclipse as well. So that'll just be December 14th. That'll just be a good time of It's a healing eclipse, so it's going to be in a fucus. So it'll be probably very close to your sun, actually, which is important for you. Yeah. But really just listening and seeing, what comes up, because it's a south node eclipse, and this could be things from the past, it could be karmic, and it's all internal. It's like what comes up that we can just become more aware of and accept. And it's the acceptance that then leads us to being able to heal the energy. So things can come up for healing. It could be physical healing for a lot of us. It could be spiritual healing for a lot of us. But paying attention to what comes up and then setting intentions going into 2021 to maybe do some of these things in the face of some wounds, or to start initiating some healing in our life in some way, be a very, very constructive way of working with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a combo with the foundation shaking and the eclipse at the same kind of time, right?
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Very much so.
Well, and it's interesting when as you're saying that, like being really intentional about our perceptions and being really intentional about our where we want to head, our intentions, being intentional about our intentions.
That's
but
true.
being really clear about that. When you're talking about that, it makes me think of this, the wording that we're being bombarded with right now is the novel corona, which is new crown, new mind, or whatever. And then the even that comet that was going by was neo wise, which is like new wisdom or whatnot. And so I feel like that's being sort of pushed at us to, maybe they're trying to kind of co-opt those energies and give us a new mind, but maybe we want to be even more intentional about like keeping our mind for ourselves and being, what we want it to be instead of what someone else might want it to be.
I agree 100%. Yep. Be intentional with your intentions. That's actually that's true, because you can be unintentional with your intentions.
That's true.
Pay attention to your beliefs, your perspective, right? And then also what are you absorbing from others or the collective and stuff, because that has an influence on your perception of your life, of your reality. Right. Yeah.
Especially if it's being like sort of unconsciously absorbed, without any sort of critical lens or filter.
Yeah, exactly.
So that when you're talking about like acceptance of the the past, what's happened in the past in order to heal, it's also has echoes of what we're seeing socially right now. And so I guess I hope that energy really kind of takes all of that and allows it to be resolved. It'd be nice, if we could all feel at peace together again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it will. It's a process because it goes into next year, but it's definitely the beginning of it, I think, in that sense, because it'll be the first eclipse in a fucus. The last ones were in Sagittarius and Gemini. So now they're going to be in a fucus in Taurus, which is a new energy. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh yeah. I was just reading about this. The eclipses, I didn't realize they were opposite each other on the chart or on the wheel or whatever. And that it's always like that.
So in the astrology, like when you saw your chart, the nodes, the north and south nodes, that's where the eclipses happen.
Okay.
So wherever they're in transit, and so those nodes are moving, and they move around the whole chart every 18 years, so a very long time. So they spend about a year and a half in each constellation, and so it's usually about a year and a half's energy of developing that polarity. So we were in the polarity of perspective, Sagittarius, Gemini.
Yeah.
We're going to go into the polarity of deeper and physical values and healing and that kind of thing in nature.
And you said that's a fucus and Taurus?
Yep. And then it'll be Scorpio and Taurus. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's excellent. And so I guess I want to ask you then where you are heading from here. Are you developing any like new classes or new projects, or are there things you want to tell people about that are coming up, or anything like that?
So natal chart interpretations that you can just get a copy of, because there wasn't a way to do this. So I had to pretty much create all the interpretations with the true sidereal system. Wow. So it's a work in progress. Wow. It's been at least 6 months in the making. It might take another 6 months, but super valuable, because I think a lot of people, they just want to have a printout and just take a look and read it, And a lot of other astrology sites offer that, but we don't have that in the true sidereal. So hopefully that'll be out by the end of the year, and that'll be super cool, because you can just, within a click of a button, get some information and interpret it.
That's so you're talking about doing every single permutation. You're like moon in every single sign, sun in every single sign. Wow. That's really good.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so is that, you hope to have that available soon, but before then people can just kind of book a session with you and get your interpretation. So cool.
Yep, still doing readings, and then it's always easy too to interpret your own chart in the sense that it takes a long time to do every single one. But if you're just looking and comparing two things like Sun and Taurus, Sun and Ophiuchus, and I even have videos on that stuff too. So when you do get the chart, there's a PDF, and you click on it, you can watch the video for that placement. You know,
cool.
So.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. I just went the hard way and looked everything up myself. But
I think the PDFs are on there. They should be.
I think what I did is I took a screenshot of it and I saved it for like a year and sat on it, and then I brought it out and was like, I'm just going to piece this all together on my own because I like to do things the hard way, apparently.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, check out the PDFs then. I think they're on that page, but if not, just let me know. I'll send them over.
Cool. And then obviously we've said your site and everything a few times, but let's give people another chance to get it clear where they can find you and connect with you and get more from you.
Yeah, so masteringthezodiac.com. That's where all the resources are. There's also a YouTube channel, so by the same name, Mastering the Zodiac, and Instagram recently as well. So if you're into Instagram, there's Mastering the Zodiac. Yeah,
cool.
All the same name, website. Yep.
That is the way to go. I also didn't do that, but
oh yeah. Yeah.
It's much easier that way. And so I like to give people an opportunity, Athen, to give your sort of final words of like wisdom or just what you want to leave people with as we're closing things down, as you know, for them to think further about.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, it felt like that's what this was about. Yeah. So in your personal life, like, listen to your inner guidance. That's the most important thing. With all the collective stuff going on, same thing. Listen to where your spirit's guiding you, your soul, like, connect there and just, do your best to live as balanced as possible. I would say that's my perspective of it, because like I was saying earlier, like there's all these elements of life that are trying to get us to push to these extremes. And like with all these extremes, they are valuable because that's when we grow, the most. But just be conscious of the process, because it really is this like recalibration process. And I think fundamentally it's about seeing two sides of the coin and then doing our best to, walk that centered path, being conscious of both polarities. And, that usually leads to the most fulfillment and the most peace and less stress and wellness and happiness and, good relationships and stuff. So yeah, I would say definitely that centered path is the way to go.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. And fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to Athen Chimenti. Athen, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It was great.
Awesome. Well, the heavens map above us out the intricacies of our minute internal worlds in stunning depth and breadth, in order to remind us that we are much larger and more complex than we might imagine. And the minutiae lead us to the expanse of all that is, and the rambling largesse of all that is leads us right back into the core of ourselves, right here, right now. As above, so below, as within, so without. And it is exactly because you are everywhere, glorious and infinite, and right here, compact and intricate, that you are consistently able to choose to travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
Motherfucker unknown. Yeah, come on. In the place with my fist up, meaning I resist the bullshit that they feed us and lead us. This is just a part of the process, man. Just watch this, cause this shit's about to get crazy like a mosh pit. We lost it, toss it, let's start it again. Cause now with technology, with smarter men and women, this is the beginning, not the end. And this is the message of hope that I send. Look on your TV, it's a culture of death. They'll keep on lying to the very last breath. We keep on striving and spreading the truth. It's hard to survive in this world full of youth. The door is closed, the old world is dead. Let's have an age of understanding instead. I'll include you and you include include me. Let's see what we can build with some positivity. Let's go. You're moving too slow. Let me see your hands if you know what I know. Come on.
Rap like mummy, ain't no dummy in my rhyming. Started flowing freestyling, now they rhyming loud silence. On with the violence, bodies piling with the gray-bearded pirate. On your TV in 4K 3D virtual reality. Casualty of urban warfare. I know but I'm not scared, just prepared and aware. Shining my light through the tunnel of hope. Into the rope, but I'ma give it one more pull. Till the family is full. Take the bull by the horns and lead it to the slaughter. That would be harder and you would be softer. Sometimes I'm a monster, and you forever imposter, which is champagne and lobster. This royalty, the way it was supposed to be. Hopefully the new door opens and the old one closes, with way more focus and growth to mold us, and the truth that they should have told us.
To them screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rulers that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that a flicker rate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The poppers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet. Everyone got a gift, everyone got a light. They want you to forget that ish, cause they can't dim the bright. The positive vibration takes you past the sign shackles. From the sewers and the alleys in the moving castles. Who these assholes really serving with an exposed Achilles surgeon around the corner lurking to prove ascension trumps perversion. Learn them to catch fish and unplug the signal. Show them the simpletons now build the fucking temples.